Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Cabinet meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the Cabinet meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, post on social media, or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. I'd like to welcome Opposition Group Leader Councillor Jay Walker, who will be asking a question, and also members of the public that have joined us in the arena this evening. So I'd now like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Clark, and apologies possibly from Councillor Verdi, who is trapped in London with the problem with the trains and the heat, who is hoping to join us if he can get here on time. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are you happy for me to sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a true record? Show of hands. Thank you. Item 4, citizens' questions. I believe we've had none. No, thank you. So item 5, opposition group leaders' questions. Councillor Walker, if you'd like to come and ask your question. There are 15 minutes allocated for this item, and if a question cannot be answered within the allocated time, a written response will be provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Could the portfolio holder explain in more detail the implications from the softening of the language within the proposed supplementary planning document for Tollerton and Gamston, shifting the key requirements into what now reads more as aspirations rather than firm expectations?
Thank you, Councillor Walker, for your question. The SPD is really to guide development and support the local plan, not to introduce new policy. I do accept your point about the change of tone, if you like, of some of the language used in the revised SPD, which we were discussing later. Our approach really has been to review the language and strike the right balance, if you like, between directive terms and aspirational terms that you refer to. I will give quite a significant statement, if you like, from our legal advisors when I present agenda item 7 later on this evening on that SPD that you refer to.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Okay, thank you, Councillor Upton. Will the SPD be put through further scrutiny, i.e. will it be brought to council, full council, or scrutiny, or possibly public consultation?
I think the short answer is no. It's been a long journey and I've been here 3 or 4 times on this SPD. It's had public consultation, and again I'll refer to that later on in agenda item 7, but the short answer is no.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Okay, item 6, new Rushcliffe local plan, and that's over to you again, Councillor Upton.
Yes, it becomes the Councillor Upton show again, doesn't it? Anyway, thank you, Chairman. I think my first comment is that I can understand if there is some confusion as to why we are starting this new Rushcliffe local plan when we are in the final stages of working on the draft Greater Nottingham strategic plan that I've been reporting on to Cabinet many times. Quite frankly, we have no choice. The Greater Nottingham strategic plan will be examined next month by government inspectors and then hopefully continue its long journey to adoption early next year, irrespective of it being replaced by the new Rushcliffe local plan comparatively soon after. Regardless of this, to comply with Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning Regulations 2026 and the local plan funding conditions, we must start the preparation of a new local plan. We have no choice. It's a statutory requirement, and we must publish a notice of intention to commence the local plan preparation by the 30th of June, which is only in 7 days' time. Failure to issue this notice would prevent this council from validly entering a 30-month plan preparation process. I pause here to highlight the 30-month timescale that is required by the legislation, which I'm sure will bring many challenges, not least that from next month, we, and particularly the officers, will be working on 2 local plans simultaneously. The report sets out in detail what we must do to prepare the new Rushcliffe local plan. The former plan making framework is now replaced with an allegedly a more streamlined preparation process structured around 3 defined gateways, and table 1 in the report gives an indicative timetable for the adoption of the new plan by the 30th of April 2029. Although the new Rushcliffe local plan is, as it says, just for the Rushcliffe area, nevertheless, we will continue to work with the Greater Nottingham Planning Partnership to ensure that the new local plans are aligned where appropriate. And the good news is that Rushcliffe Borough Council and Nottingham City Council will both be producing their new local plans following the same timetable as ours. As I've said, we propose to complete and adopt the new Rushcliffe local plan by April 2029, but this is after the new local government structures across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire are due to come into effect in April 2028. However, at present, what form the new authorities will take is not yet known, and the council will have to consider the implications of LGR on the new plan when the reorganisation is announced. National planning policy and associated proposed reforms make it quite clear that LGR is not a valid reason to delay the new plan preparation. Not an ideal situation, I agree, but one that we must work with. The adoption of the new Rushcliffe local plan would replace the local plan documents in force at the time covering the whole of Rushcliffe. This will include the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan, soon to be examined and expected to be adopted early in 2027, and importantly, the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2, which was adopted back in 2019. The new local plan would be a single document for the whole of Rushcliffe and would include new site allocations and a range of planning policies to help determine future planning applications. I'll briefly comment about the new plan and the new site allocations. The new plan will have to be focused on delivering 100% of the government's mandatory housing target for Rushcliffe. This means more housing than the 80% we are required to identify in the current draft Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan as part of our transition process, therefore more sites. Quite how many new sites and houses will be required is difficult to calculate as the respective plan periods differ, but it's estimated that around 1,900 additional houses may be required for the new plan period. Just something to be aware of. That said, this administration has said to government that it does not believe in their mandatory housing targets and that it believes that local communities know what is best for them. Chairman, the issuing of the notice of intention to commence the local plan preparation is a statutory requirement of Regulation 19 of the 2026 regulations. Failure to fully comply could invalidate subsequent stages of the plan preparation and place the council at risk of challenge. Chairman, it's recommended that Cabinet adopt the 3 recommendations in item 2 on page 7. Would you like me to read them out, or are you contented if they are taken as published in the report?
Let's take them as published in the report.
Thank you. Then I recommend those items A, B and C, page 7, item 2 of the report in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I'm seconding tonight, not because I'm happy we're going to be getting lots more houses potentially in the area. It's mainly because we, as has been outlined by Councillor Upton, we have to have a local plan. Otherwise, we are open to potential extra development and sites coming that wouldn't be suitable for the borough. It's outlined in 3.1 and 3.2 the reason why this is needed. But it is worth highlighting again how mad the situation is, that you've got the second, our current local plan going through for examination. A lot of work's gone in, and we should pay tribute to our planning officers, the amount of time and a lot more patience than I have in terms of putting this together. And then effectively you've got to start again with a third new local plan at the same time as LGR happening. So when that goes through, then you have to relook at it again as a new area. So the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of taxpayer money being spent, not just in Rushcliffe but across the whole country, sort of sums up the terrible situation we've got ourselves into, thanks to the government, in terms of the process has all been done. It could be done a hell of a lot better than it is, but as has already been outlined, we have to do this. The residents need to be aware that there's potentially more housing coming than we want, because that's what's been set by the government, and they set the housing policy. So residents out there, as we'll get to later, if they don't like the current housing policy, don't like more houses, please take it up with the MP and with government, because they're the ones who are setting that policy. We unfortunately have to follow it, or we potentially get our decision making taken away and planning applications determined by government. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, observations on the paper? No. Well, as the point's been clearly articulated, we are required to produce this local plan in order to deliver the government's new mandatory targets. The fact that the whole of local government is going to be reorganised during the process is not a reason for us to enable a delay to the process. We must carry on going forward, and as Councillor Wheeler says, this will result in additional house building across the borough according to government's house building ambitions. So on that basis, the paper has been moved and has been seconded, and can I ask for a vote to approve the recommendations, please? Thank you. Okay, I'll move us on now to item 7, East of Gamston, North of Tollerton Development Framework, SBD, and that's back to you again, Councillor Upton. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Well, here I am again presenting the East of Gamston, North of Tollerton Development Framework Supplementary Planning Document, and that in itself is quite a mouthful. Firstly, I'd like to read out the following statement that has been prepared by the Council's solicitors, Pinsett Masons, to make it clear that certain correspondence has been shared with all the Cabinet members, here and not here, ahead of this meeting. It's a rather long and detailed and technical statement. I make no apologies for that, but here goes. Bear with me. The solicitors of Save Nottingham Airfield Group, SNAG, have written to the Council's external solicitors on the 17th of June 2026, asserting that the readoption of the SPD would be unlawful because of a regulatory breach, on the basis that the updates to the SPD are extensive, having a material effect, and that a public consultation was required. The letter also asserts that the proposed updates effectively amount to a new SPD, and it is not lawfully possible to prepare a new SPD at this point in time. A response was sent from the Council's external solicitors on the 19th of June 2026, strongly rebutting the claims. A further response was received from SNAG solicitors on the 22nd of June. It is noted that SNAG intend to reply to the proposed amendments to the SPD, but have not been able to do so before this Cabinet meeting. In this respect, it should be noted that the amendments to the SPD were made as a direct result of SNAG's representations through the judicial review process, notwithstanding the Council's position that the challenge does not have any merit. In any event, SNAG has been provided with an opportunity to provide further comment on the minor tweaks to the SPD if they choose to do so. All correspondence has been shared with Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting. The advice received from the Council's external solicitors, as detailed within the letter to the claimant's solicitor, is that the SPD proposed for readoption is the same fundamental document as the adopted SPD, with some minor amendments. A 5-week public consultation was undertaken on the SPD prior to adoption. A consultation statement was subsequently published, setting out the comments received and how they were taken into account. Due to the proposed amendments being minor, with no material change to the SPD, the council solicitors have advised that further public consultation on the SPD was not required. As to the amendments themselves, it is a matter of judgment as to whether amendments are minor, and the council is entitled to lawfully exercise that judgment in a reasonable manner, and has done so in this case. These matters have all been properly considered and are consistent with well understood legal principles, including those in the legal cases Elphinstone versus Westminster City Council 2008 and Nettleship versus NHS South Tyne Clinical Commissioning Group 2020. The SPD is guidance only and does not form part of the development plan. Nevertheless, it can still properly and lawfully seek to require things, provided that compliance or non-compliance with the guidance by the applicant is only taken into account as a material planning consideration, alongside other material planning considerations in assessing the planning balance and determining the application in accordance with section 38C of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. In response to the points raised by Snag in the judicial review, the council has reviewed some of the directional language in the SPD and made some minor refinements. These are intended to finesse the language used to set out where the guidance requires or expects, etc., things to be done. The changes are minor as their effect is to clarify and refine what the approach of the council may be in considering how closely the application accords with the guidance, albeit always in the context of these considerations being only a material planning consideration to be taken into account in the planning balance when determining the application. The refinements are by themselves minor and also minor in the context of the planning balance in the determination of planning applications. However, they are considered to provide helpful clarity as to the council's views and expectations and to respond to some of the points raised in the judicial review. The council does not consider that these minor amendments are necessary from a legal perspective. However, they are recommended on a precautionary basis because the cut-off date for the completion of SPDs by the end of June 2026 means that there would not be any opportunity for subsequent minor changes after that date. The minor amendments sought to the SPD do not materially change the substance of the SPD. Instead, they simply make it clear that, as the amended text of the proposed SPD says explicitly in paragraph 1.7, where reference is made to something being required or a requirement, or that, my apologies, paper, or that something will, must, shall, or is expected to be provided or is mandatory, or to development not being likely to be supported if it is inconsistent with this SPD, then that must be understood in the context of this SPD being a material planning consideration and not a development plan document. The statutory consultees, including Natural England, Historic England, and the Environment Agency, have been consulted on the proposed Supplemental Strategic Environmental Assessment, or SEA. At the time of publication of the Cabinet report, the Council had received consultation comments from only two of the statutory bodies, Historic England and Natural England. However, the Environment Agency has now also responded to the consultation. Positive responses have been received from all three bodies, agreeing with the Council that a full SEA is not required. The council received a letter from the consortium of developers on the 18th of June 2026, which has been shared with Cabinet ahead of tonight's meeting. The letter sets out representations to the effect that material considerations for the planning applications do not need to include an adopted SPD, and that the council can be content that the consortium are working cooperatively to deliver the SUE, Sustained Urban Extension. The council's external solicitors and officers disagree that an SPD is not required as a material consideration. The SPD provides a key guidance for applicants across a range of topics to help guide development proposals in this important SUE, including in relation to important transport, social, community infrastructure provision, commensurate with housing delivery. The SPD will help to hold developers to account in the determination of the applications and provides a range of guidance to inform the applicant's proposals. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the legal statement I've been asked to speak. I'll just take another glass of water before I go into my reasonably brief context of the plan.
Thank you. That was a lot of reading. Do take a drink.
It was rather a lot of reading, but here goes. Well, Cabinet members are, I guess, aware of the background to this SPD, but for the wider audience that's out there viewing us at the moment, some of them may not. So I'll give a brief context. This site was adopted as a sustainable urban extension as part of the Rushcliffe local plan back in 2014, and it's included in the draft Greater Nottingham strategic plan that's going to be examined next month. Continuing delays on this SPD will risk the council meeting the government's mandatory housing target and could also put pressure to release new sites in Rushcliffe to maintain our 5-year housing land supply, with potentially more unplanned development. The 30th of June, as we heard, is the cut-off date for the adoption or amendment of SPDs as set out in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023, hence the report this evening. We believe it's better to have a plan than no plan, as without a plan, there's a risk that individual planning applications would be made for parcels of land in a random manner without any real comprehensive planning. This SPD is to provide a strategic plan or a master plan for the proposed development. It does not go into detail or give planning approval for any development, but gives guidance for developers, and it will be a material planning consideration in determining planning applications. It provides guidance on a range of topics: design, highways, hydrology, biodiversity, movement access, etc., to help ensure the site is developed as an attractive and enduring place to live and work. It includes reference also to the Tolleton Neighbourhood Plan. On the 10th of March, this Cabinet adopted this SPD, but on the 6th of May, as we've heard, a claim was made by the Save Nottingham Airfield Group seeking permission to apply for a judicial review of this decision. We believe that the objective of the judicial review is to bring the airfield back into use, but in our opinion, a successful JR would not achieve this, as the land is allocated within the Rushcliffe local plan for a sustainable urban extension, and a JR cannot remove this allocation. The JR, in my opinion, is a legal process by which the courts examine whether a public authority has acted lawfully and in accordance with proper procedures when making a decision, rather than reconsidering the merits of that decision. The council has sought legal advice, and it will defend any JR claim against the adopted SPD, as it does not consider this claim to have merit or be arguable. The report before Cabinet again this evening for adoption, because minor changes have been made and a reconsidered strategic environmental assessment and habitats regulation assessment screening option has been undertaken, which continues to conclude that the SPD does not in itself create any likely significant environment effects, including no new or materially different likely significant environmental effects compared to those assessed in relation to the adopted local plan. Public consultation was undertaken prior to adoption in March, and our legal advisors have said that due to the amendments being minor, with no material change to the SPD, no further public consultation is required. Some concerns have been raised about possible ground contamination on parts of the site, but this issue is not for the SPD and should be dealt with at the planning application stage with site investigation and remediation planning condition perhaps. The main landowners and developers are now working to a collaborative and aligned approach, and there is now a single aligned highways access strategy for the entire site, with more transport modelling progressing as I speak. This SPD proposes two mechanisms to ensure the right infrastructure is delivered at the right time and is built and funded as appropriate, namely an infrastructure delivery plan, which will detail what strategic infrastructure will need to be delivered. And secondly, a framework section 106, which is essentially a template section 106 to be used consistently for all applications on the site. This month, PlacePoint, a 150 million joint venture between Vistry the house builder and the government's National Housing Bank, announced the acquisition of part of the site. As I understand it, this joint venture is focused on delivering housing at a pace and is to contribute to the government's ambition to deliver 1.5 million new homes by the end of this Parliament. In conclusion, without this SPD in place, there's a real risk that this council could lose a significant degree of control over what development is delivered on this strategic housing site and its quality. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the re-adoption of the SPD, which is set out in Appendix 1, and the endorsement of the reconsidered and updated SEA HRA screening opinion set out in Appendix 2. For the avoidance of doubt, once re-adopted, the updated SPD will supersede the previously adopted SPD and continue the function of being an important material consideration in the determination of relevant planning applications for this site. Chairman, it's recommended that Cabinet adopt the recommendations, which are again quite lengthy, set out in item 2 of the report, page 27. There are 3 quite lengthy sections to those. I'll gladly read them out if you want me to, or do you want to take them as read?
We'll take them as read.
Thank you. That concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Well, you covered an enormous amount of ground there. Thank you very much. We do appreciate that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Inglis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Upton's provided a clear and comprehensive update on this SPD. I will generally say, however, that we must not lose sight or direction to what the Council is trying to achieve with the production of this SPD. Rushcliffe Borough Council is 100% responsible, and many hours of office time has been put into producing this SPD. And yes, it has been amended as it is a live document under scrutiny and also subject to ongoing conflicting legal opinions. I draw attention to 1.3. I feel that it's very alarming that Rushcliffe Council taxpayers could face an estimated £100,000 bill or more for the Save Nottingham Airfield Group judicial review that will not serve any purpose to their objectives and bring the airfield back into use. The SPD is a document to protect. It is a document for guidance. It is a document for multi-developers to work and to be held accountable in order to provide the best possible collaboration for the infrastructure, design and facilities for the site. It is not a planning consent. Planning consent will only be considered separately once all material planning considerations have been met. I again reiterate, the SPD is not a planning consent. The Council have had to provide land provision to meet the government's national housing targets. They are not Rushcliffe Borough Council targets, but we have to play our part. The land is not owned by Rushcliffe. It has been sold and the owners have closed it down as an airfield to enable their desire to develop it into meeting those local and national housing provision objectives. There is a deadline to meet. The consequences of not meeting this deadline are quite clear in the report. Do we really want to go there with no protection for any future development, we must recognise and plan for what is the best interest to any future and to our existing communities. I've said it before that I fully understand the passion and the drive to save the airfield for some people, but it's not everyone. But that reality lies with the landowner and not Rushcliffe Borough Council. So it is my opinion that this SPD is an important and crucial document for the future protection and control of this site and must be submitted before the 30th of June deadline. So I'll be supporting the recommendations as in A, B and C of part 9 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor English. Any other comments? Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Councillor Upton and English for that copy. There's a lot of detail covered there, and the officers for all the amount of detail put into the report. I think a lot of it is similar to what I said before, but really need to emphasise a couple of points. As you said, we've had the legal advice, and I accept the legal advice, and that we're absolutely able to make a decision here today. The SPD does not mean we're going to get any houses on that site. That is separate. So an SPD is there to try to protect if we get that development. As you always say, we've had a letter from a consortium of landowners going, trust us, it's fine, honestly. Well, we've already seen in the past that land changes hands. We already know that the county council are looking at that. We've already just heard about the acquisition that's happened part of the Vistry site there. We have to have this in place. We don't know who potentially could take that land in the future and what they might do different. We've been burned before in areas across Rushcliffe, and we can't let that happen again. And for a development of this size, it's really important we've got the infrastructure in place to support the residents who be moving there and for the existing residents who are in situ in the surrounding area, including those who I represent in Gamston Ward. As has already been said, as a council, we have to follow the planning policy that's set by government. So that before the last item said again here. So I completely understand people's passion about this, but the energy and the frustration is being channeled in the wrong place. To prevent houses being built in areas, that has to go to government, has to be lobbied to the MP, has to be lobbied to ministers to change the housing targets, to change protections in place for certain areas to land, etc. We can't do it as a council. We have to follow national planning guidance. Otherwise, as already been said, we could have this power taken off us, and that development would happen without having the local say over it and being able to put the protection in place. There's been concerns, I understand that, about possible contamination on the site. Get that. That will be dealt with at planning application stage. We can't have that's why the SPD has already been outlined. And so again, we hope that the developers bring that if they do bring the applications further forwards, they do make sure that is covered and that there is that public reassurance given to residents as part of that process, because that is, I do know that's a key point for many. But as you said tonight there, SPD we've got to have in place to give us that protection. We've got the deadline of 30th of June that we have to meet that's been imposed by government. So we're here tonight, and we've obviously discussed this many times before, and so we'll be supported tonight because we want to have that protection in place for my residents and the future residents who will be living on this development. Thank you, if it takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Any further comments? No, thank you. Well, for not wanting to repeat the comments that have been made before, this SPD is key guidance for this site. We need to ensure that such an extensive build is developed to the best possible quality and creates a cohesive and attractive community, and not simply extensive uncoordinated housing estates or estate. And I know we keep repeating that the SPD does not approve planning applications, but it doesn't. This is part of the consideration of a planning process, and it is our most important tool to make sure that this development is of good quality, is appropriate, and is something that we can be proud of in the future. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations. They have been moved and seconded. So can I please have a show of hands in support of the recommendations? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll move us on to designation of new local nature reserves. Councillor Inglis.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to seek approval for the designation of 3 new local nature reserves, otherwise LNRs, in Rushcliffe under the powers provided by Section 21 of the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act of 1949. Rushcliffe Borough Council has previously declared 8 LNRs as protected areas, statutorily designed by local authorities due to their special nature interest and educational value, with the aim and the reasons to recommend is to regulate them as nature reserves, act on the Council's pledges in conserving and enhancing biodiversity, and to meet Rushcliffe Conservation Strategy 2026 to 2030 in identifying and designating new sites. So I'm pleased to bring these 3 sites for recommendation that have been proposed following requests from their individual supporting management groups as detailed in part 4.4 of the report. The first one is the Green Line at West Bridgeford. This is part of a former railway. This section runs from Melton Road to Boundary Road. The site has been used as a nature area public space since 1988. It has a nature conservation interest and is designed and designated a local wildlife site by the Nottingham Biological and Geological Record Centre. The site is owned by the council and its day-to-day management is shared with the Green Line Conservation Group under a service level agreement. The second one is Meadow Park at East Leek. Meadow Park is almost 18 hectares of former agricultural land that was given to the council in 1995 as a permanent leisure facility for local residents. The Nottinghamshire Biological and Geological Record Centre designated the site to a local wildlife site on the 1st of May 2024. The park remains under the control of the council, but day-to-day management of the park has been in the hands of East Leek Parish Council and the Friends of the Meadow Park volunteers since 2009. The third one is Springdale Wood at East Bridgeford. This is a 1.41 hectare site created by the Woodland Trust in November 1999 on former arable land, which was purchased by the Woodland Trust as one of 200 woods on your doorstep across the UK. East Bridgeford Parish Council took a 999-year lease that commenced in 2016. Day-to-day management is provided by the East Bridgeford Wildlife and Biodiversity Community Interest Company since 2016. As the council does not own the site, a management agreement between the council, East Bridgeford Parish Council as a leaseholder, and the Woodland Trust as the freeholder has been agreed to enable the council to declare the site as an LNR. The maps for these areas are contained in Appendix 1. Natural England has been consulted on proposals to designate these sites as LNRs for the Green Line and Meadow Park, and to quote from part 4.5 of the report, Natural England is supportive of these plans for both sites, as the declaration as an LNR will ensure the future management of the sites for the benefit of the local community in terms of outdoor recreation and for wildlife and green infrastructure connectivity. For East Bridgeford, they replied, Natural England is delighted to support the declaration of the site as an LNR. Protecting the site and its habitats will allow it to continue to be used and valued by local people for recreation and enjoyment of their natural environment. Management plans for the site will be overseen by council officers, and there is no direct financial implications to this council. Prior legal obligations have been met with Natural England's consultation, and if approved this evening, the post-legal requirements, as is 7.2, will be met. I'd like to thank and highlight the excellent work, passion and dedication that Paul Phillips and Sandrina Ficonocchio-Daniels put into their ecology, sustainability and biodiversity for this council and for the whole borough of Rushcliffe. I have no hesitation in recommending the approval of these 3 sites in part 9 of the report, as they will support good management of our environmental assets whilst providing publicly accessible green spaces to enhance residents' quality of life. So, do you want to read those out, the recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was Councillor Inglis, a lot of detail. I mean, just to say, really support this paper tonight, the recommendations. It's great to create some more green areas, so there's protection in place. So, really welcome it, and hopefully we can have even more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, well, it's nice to be able to approve something that's protecting our green spaces rather than building houses on them. So on that basis, thank you. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll now move us to the final item, number 9, which is the East Midlands Freeport Strategic Infrastructure and Contributions Supplementary Planning Document. And surprise, I'm going to ask Councillor Upton to move it, please.
Thank you. Another mouthful, really, isn't it, in its title, that I shan't repeat it again, but thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say that this report has been prepared on a collaborative basis by the 3 local planning authorities for the East Midlands Freeport sites, namely Rushcliffe Borough Council, North West Leicestershire District Council and South Derbyshire District Council. It's had a 5-week public consultation, and the intention is that all 3 councils adopt this supplementary planning document by the 30th of June to support the East Midlands Freeport project. South Derbyshire approved it, I'm told, on the 18th of June, and North West Leicestershire is taking it to its cabinet today. As we've heard earlier this evening, the 30th of June is the national cut-off date for the adoption of SPDs. As beyond this date, it's not possible for planning authorities to adopt an SPD. It's quite a key date, actually, a number of issues, isn't it? The 30th of June. The principal purpose of this East Midlands Freeport, here we go, Infrastructure and Contributions SPD, is to support the development of the Freeport and to help ensure the coordinated and collaborative delivery and funding of the strategic transport infrastructure needed to support the development of the 3 East Midlands Freeport sites. The development of these Freeport sites and other major development sites adjacent to or outside the EMP sites within the 3 council areas, which will significantly benefit from the SPD sites, will be expected to make contributions towards the strategic transport infrastructure on an equitable and proportionate basis. This is the key purpose of this SPD. Now, more work to underpin the SPD will need to be done through an EMF infrastructure delivery plan, the IDP process, including highways modelling, and this will be the subject of public consultation and adoption in due course. The SPD envisages a framework Section 106 agreement to coordinate the funding and the delivery of the strategic transport infrastructure from multiple sites through the planning process, as and when those sites come forward for development. The SPD includes a statement that until such time as the infrastructure delivery plan has been endorsed, only limited weight should be given to it as a material planning consideration, though the in principle need for pooled contributions carries weight as a material planning consideration. The draft SPD is accompanied by a strategic environmental assessment and habitat regulation screening report at Appendix 3. We've heard of those earlier this evening. And following consultation with the statutory authorities, the conclusion is that the SPD does not require an SEA or an HRA. The cross-party Rushcliffe Council Local Development Forum considered this revised draft SPD at its meeting on the 6th of June, and by a majority vote of 7-4 and 4 against, supported the revised draft SPD and recommended to Cabinet that it be adopted. Now, as the chairman of the LDF, I did give an undertaking that I would comment on the views of some members of the forum, that the focus of the report appeared to them to be on strategic road transport with little, if any, mention of rail and public transport. In conclusion, however, without this SPD, there would be a greater risk that development associated with the East Midlands Freeport comes forward without the necessary strategic infrastructure contributions. Chairman, it's recommended that Cabinet adopt the 5 recommendations listed in the report. 5 quite lengthy recommendations. Item 2, page 294. Again, would you like me to read them, or happy to take them?
I think it is read, thank
Take
you.
them as in the report. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Upton, and I am seconding this paper. You've made a very comprehensive resume as usual, Councillor Upton, but I will just add that this is an incredibly important site. The Freeport bit within Rushcliffe sits on the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station site, which is a major strategic employment site for the borough. It's an important site in Rushcliffe, it's an important site for the wider region, and it's probably an important site nationally in terms of bringing forward jobs, innovative businesses and economic growth and development. So it's really important that the Freeport is able to move forward with its other ports, other sites within the Freeport, but particular interest to us, of course, for Rushcliffe-on-Soar, that the proper infrastructure is in place and that the sooner we can start moving to attract investment and innovation onto that site, the better. So I'm very happy to second the recommendation that we adopt this SPD for the Freeport, and I'm happy to put that to further discussion. Any other comments? None? Okay, thank you very much, in which case it has been moved by Councillor Upton, seconded by myself, Councillor Brennan. Can I have a show of hands to support the recommendation, please? And that's unanimous. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all very much and enjoy the football.